Okay, let's unpack this. What truly shapes who we become? What are those, bedrock beliefs, the ones that steer our decisions, especially when things get tough?
Right, those defining moments.
Yeah, exactly. Socrates famously said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." And today, we're not just glancing at that, we're going deep.
Welcome to the deep dive. This is really designed for you, the learner. Our goal here is to sift through some really compelling material, pull out the core wisdom.
You've got those aha moments.
Precisely. So you leave feeling genuinely informed, maybe thinking a bit differently, but definitely not like you've just wrestled a textbook.
Totally. And today, our deep dive takes us into the thinking of General Stanley McChrystal, specifically his book on character. We're exploring his reflections on, conviction, discipline, and what ultimately makes up character.
And he draws on this huge wealth of experience, right?
Sure.
Military, post-military.
Absolutely. So our mission, really, is to understand McChrystal's perspective on these fundamentals. Right. How are convictions formed? How are they tested?
And why do they matter so much? For navigating, everything. Personal life, professional life?
Right. So the central mission today, get to the heart of McChrystal's thinking on these essential human elements.
Let's get started, then.
Okay. So McChrystal points to a specific moment, a pivotal day in the White House, as a real turning point for him.
Yeah, something that triggered a much deeper look inward. An examination of his own convictions, his character.
It sounds like it had a pretty significant impact.
Well, what's interesting is how he frames it. He doesn't dwell on the specifics of the day itself.
Okay.
But he stresses that its real importance wasn't as like an endpoint or some sudden change. It was more of a catalyst.
Catalyst for introspection.
Exactly. It didn't break him, he says, didn't instantly redefine him, but it definitely forced him to really examine his core beliefs, his convictions, what truly mattered to him.
And that leads us right back to Socrates, doesn't it?
It does.
McChrystal engages with that famous quote, "the unexamined life one," but he sort of broadens it out. It's not just about looking inward, is it?
That's his interpretation, yeah. He sees Socrates' wisdom as a call to examine the world around us more deeply, more intentionally.
So not just our own stuff, our own experiences.
Right. Not just personal wins and losses, but engaging with the bigger picture, the wider context, and then consciously forming our beliefs based on that thoughtful consideration.
That makes a lot of sense because, we all have thoughts, beliefs inside.
Sure.
But McChrystal seems to put a really strong emphasis on our actions, what we actually do.
Absolutely. He's quite clear on that. Our inner thoughts, our convictions, they can be hard to pin down, maybe even elusive.
Right.
But our actions, they're tangible. You can see them. And ultimately, he argues, they're the most reliable sign of our character.
We can say one thing.
But what we consistently do reveals who we really are.
Yeah.
Now, this part I found really interesting. Even after this whole career, filled with intense experiences.
McChrystal looks back and wishes he'd spent more time thinking deeply about his convictions earlier in life.
That's quite an admission, isn't it? A bit vulnerable.
It really is. It makes you wonder about the timing,
Where?
When should we be doing this deep thinking?
Well, his reflection suggests that even a life packed with action, with huge responsibilities, can still be richer if you engage with these foundational questions earlier, more deliberately.
And it's not like he suddenly turned into some academic philosopher in retirement, right?
Yeah.
He talks about belatedly looking at philosophical ideas.
Right. Not for show, not to sound smart.
No, but as a practical tool, a framework for thinking about big concepts like virtue, justice, character.
And he draws this really interesting parallel to the Founding Fathers.
Oh, yeah.
He points out they also saw this gap, right, between how we want people to behave, the ideals, and the messy reality of everyday life. And they also turn to these philosophical frameworks. It's about using the wisdom of others, that enduring wisdom, to understand ourselves and our world better.
But on the flip side, McChrystal also points out the sheer power of belief itself, even when it's rooted in something many would find harmful. He uses the example of Zarqawi, the bombers.
That's a really stark and important point. It just underscores how incredibly powerful conviction can be as a motivator.
Regardless of the reason behind it.
Regardless of its moral basis, yeah.
Yeah.
The intensity of the belief drives to action. It shows why we really need to understand what drives belief, even beliefs we totally reject.
And our own beliefs, they aren't set in stone either, are they? He talks about how his own understanding, even of things like faith or the West Point values, duty, honor, country, how that evolved over time through experience, personal interpretation.
It really speaks to how dynamic our convictions can be. They evolve. What you're taught early on, it often takes years of living, of reflecting, for it to really sink in and become personally meaningful.
So this search for conviction, it's not like digging for buried treasure, some hidden truth that's already there.
No, it seems much more like building something, a personal construction.
Right. You choose what to believe in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
McChrystal emphasizes it's about actively identifying and choosing things to believe in, things that make us better, ideally, things that contribute positively.
And that could be anything from.
Well, it could be cultivating strong friendships, healthy habits, but also embracing bigger ideas like justice, responsibility. It's about consciously choosing your anchors.
Okay. And then wrapping up this section, he mentions the uncomfortable scorecard, comparing where you are now with how you acted in the past.
Oof. Yeah, that sounds potentially challenging.
Definitely. But vital, right, for self-awareness.
It's that core part of honest self-assessment. You're not trying to rewrite history.
No.
But you're honestly looking at past choices, past behaviors, against the values you hold now. It's this ongoing cycle, isn't it? Learning, refining, understanding yourself better.
Okay, moving into part 2 then. Here McChrystal shifts a bit, looking at the influences, the observations that shaped him.
Right. He touches briefly on his family background first.
Yeah.
Son, grandson of soldiers.
Married a soldier's daughter, too.
Yeah. So it paints this picture of a very specific culture, doesn't it? Deeply ingrained.
Where service is just part of the fabric.
Exactly. Certain values are understood, shared. But he's also clear, while he acknowledges that path, everyone's journey, their interpretation, is still unique.
Then he mentions something maybe a bit unexpected as an influence later in life. His granddaughters.
Ah, yes. Like it's given him a totally fresh perspective.
It sounds like it.
What's really interesting is how he talks about that shift. He says their arrival brought this renewed sense of purpose. He even jokes, sort of, about it being a step towards saving humankind.
Oh. But it shows how unexpected relationships can just reshape your priorities, your whole outlook.
Definitely.
He also talks about community, building a strong sense of community where he lives. And it's not automatic, is it? It takes work.
That's a crucial point he makes. Real community isn't just about living near people. It's a conscious choice.
You have to put in the effort.
Yeah, intentional engagement, small gestures, connecting, sharing experiences. That's how you build those deeper bonds.
And he kind of extends that idea of connection to work and life. He doesn't see them as separate boxes.
No, more like integrated parts of a whole. He uses the Army as an example, where personal and professional stuff were just deeply tangled together.
The yin and yang idea he uses for work-life balance.
Mm-hmm. That's quite insightful. It's not about finding some perfect static balance between opposites.
Right.
It's more about understanding how all the different parts of your life fit together to create something more complete, more meaningful.
Then he brings up Gettysburg, the battle, but not just as history.
No, it's more than that for him. It's a stark reminder, isn't it, of the brutality of conflict.
But also the heroism.
Exactly. That simultaneous presence of profound courage and just devastating destruction.
So for him, Gettysburg is like a symbol.
A potent symbol, yeah. A reminder that these big historical moments are complex. They have narratives that need careful study, real understanding, not just sound bites.
It shows the human cost, but also the incredible sacrifice.
Both sides of that coin. Vividly.
Okay, this next one feels super relevant now. Digital leadership.
Ah, yes. Adapting to the online world.
He talks about needing a whole new set of communication skills.
The key insight there, I think, is that context is always crucial for leaders.
Right.
But it takes on totally new dimensions online in the digital space. Leaders have to adapt how they communicate. It's not just the message you send.
It's how people receive it, interpret it remotely.
Exactly. That becomes just as important, maybe even more so.
He also sounds a little skeptical about some corporate practices, like really complex incentive systems.
Yeah, he questions whether money is always the biggest motivator.
Is it?
Well, drawing on his corporate experience, he challenges that assumption.
Sure.
Are these intricate financial bonuses always the best way to drive performance?
Maybe not.
He suggests maybe we should focus more on the intangibles, what really inspires people, what engages teams. Might be more effective than just complex money structures.
That leads to an interesting point about the military's O Club, the officers' club. He sees it as having two sides.
A dual nature, yeah. He acknowledges, the potential for bad behavior there.
Sure.
But he also recognizes their function. They were social hubs, places where conduct could maybe be somewhat contained. For people not familiar, the O Club is the officers' social club on base.
Right, but he also closed alcohol-serving clubs in Afghanistan when he was in command.
Which shows a clear priority, doesn't it? Mission effectiveness trumped traditional social structures when necessary.
He then reflects on the civil rights movement, draws parallels to military strategy.
Highlighting the need for pressure, for sacrifice.
He doesn't see it as some smooth, easy evolution.
No, definitely not. He views it as a hard-fought campaign. It took persistent pressure, significant sacrifice to challenge those established norms. And achieving real equality is still an ongoing, often tough journey.
He also tackles the reality of the Great Divide, these inherent differences between groups, nationality, religion, culture.
And the danger of trying to just smooth them over or ignore them.
Because they're not just surface level.
That's the crucial understanding. These differences run deep. They affect how we act, how we see the world. Pretending they don't exist doesn't make them go away.
He uses the North-South divide before the Civil War as an example.
A really stark example of how deep and emotional those divisions can get, even within one country.
And finally, in this part, he really wrestles with ethics, balancing the ends and the means. Do good intentions always justify the actions?
That's the core ethical dilemma, isn't it? He points out the danger of rationalizing actions just because you want the outcome badly enough.
Using tough examples like torture, nuclear weapon.
Right. Morally fraught examples. He emphasizes how critical it is to have sacred standards, ethical lines you won't cross, and the constant struggle internally to stick to them.
Okay, part 3 gets into navigating challenges, making choices. He starts with corruption, but defines it quite broadly.
Yeah, not just outright theft.
No. It's also about leveraging your position for personal gain, that insidious nature of it.
It broadens how we think about corruption, doesn't it? It's not just stealing money. It's any unethical use of trust, of authority, for your own benefit. And that just eats away at institutions, at trust.
And he reminds us about the Constitution. It's a framework.
But not a guarantee.
Right, not a guarantee of good behavior. Its success depends on us, the citizens, our character, our active participation.
That's such a vital point. The structure is there, the rules are there, but it's the people, their character, their involvement that makes it actually work. Or not work.
He talks about war again, acknowledges the terrible human cost.
Always.
But also recognizes the courage, the commitment it can bring out in people, though he notes war rarely solves the original problem.
It's that complex spectrum again. The tragedy, the destruction, but also these extraordinary acts of bravery, of selflessness, and, yeah, that pattern where the initial war aims often get lost and it becomes about the fight itself.
He then stresses how vital competent governance is, and he sounds worried about current political dysfunction.
He really emphasizes those basic things government has to provide and warns against complacency when things aren't working. He draws some historical parallels, suggesting that if systems stay broken for too long,
things can get unstable.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
Significant instability.
This next point feels like he's talking directly to us, the listeners, about thinking for ourselves.
Yes. Especially now with so much information flying around.
He calls for independent critical thinking.
It's a crucial skill he champions. In this flood of data, opinions, the ability to step back, analyze critically, question assumptions, form your own reasoned beliefs. It's more vital than ever.
And he contrasts that with how we often read things now, maybe superficially.
Right. Skimming, maybe?
Versus what he calls deep reading, really immersing yourself in a book, grappling with ideas, arguments.
Deep reading for him is active. It's immersive. It builds a deeper understanding by engaging with complexity. It's very different from just passively consuming short bits of online content.
He brings up a novel, Once an Eagle, the characters Sam Damon and Courtney Massingale.
Ah, yes. As archetypes.
Of leadership, of character, contrasting types.
That novel becomes a really rich way to explore different leadership styles. Damon and Massingale are like powerful symbols for discussing integrity, values, the tough choices leaders face.
He even shares a personal story, his own lack of discipline as a young cadet at West Point.
And the lesson learned.
About aligning actions with convictions.
Right. It's a great reminder. Knowing what's right isn't enough. Real discipline is consistently doing what aligns with your beliefs.
When facing big setbacks, he makes this distinction between situations that are hard and situations that are painful.
That's interesting. What's the difference?
Well, he argues many challenges feel more painful emotionally than they are truly impossible to overcome. The key is resilience.
Just refusing to quit. Enduring the discomfort.
Pretty much, that willingness to push through.
Which leads perfectly into embracing the suck, right? That ranger anecdote.
Yes. Pushing past limits you thought you had, even pretending you enjoy it, can help psychologically.
It's a great phrase. It captures that idea that we often have more strength than we realize. And just reframing hardship mentally can actually help us persevere.
He explores obsession, too, its complex nature.
Yeah, the paradox. It can drive amazing achievements.
But the cost?
Exactly. The potential cost to balance, to well-being, to other parts of life. He presents that trade-off quite clearly.
And prioritization, so important. He argues for clear, limited priorities.
Fundamentally, it's about making deliberate choices and then acting on them consistently. He mentions the Ranger's big four priorities.
As an example of keeping it simple, focus.
Right. Focusing on the absolute essentials and his own habit of tracking his time. That really highlights how easily our actions can drift away from our stated priorities if we're not careful.
He observes that high-performing teams, it's not always about having the most raw talent.
No. Often it's about a shared commitment.
To exceeding standards.
Yeah. Exactly. A collective commitment to excellence. That shared drive to uphold rigorous standards can be incredibly powerful, sometimes more so than just individual brilliance.
He has a nuanced view on quitting.
It's not always bad.
Well, he acknowledges sometimes it's the smart move, strategically, especially in business, maybe, cutting your losses.
Okay.
But he warns against it becoming a habit, a default reaction to difficulty. That's dangerous.
Got it. So use it wisely, not habitually.
Right. Then leadership. He's very clear. It's not a title. It's a choice you make constantly.
An ongoing choice, yeah. Requiring integrity, intention, follow-through.
Especially now, he says, with leaders under so much scrutiny, transparency.
True. Leadership needs to be a disciplined practice. It demands credibility built on that rock of integrity, clear goals, and actually doing what you say you'll do.
He also talks about the quiet work of leadership, the stuff you don't always see.
Shaping attitudes through personal example.
Yeah.
Genuine care.
Exactly. Not always big speeches. Often it's those subtle, consistent actions that real connection leaders build that have the biggest impact. He mentions taking Yale football players to Gettysburg.
Right. To study leadership under pressure.
Yeah.
But focusing on strategy, not tactics.
So the big decisions made in that crucible.
Yeah, using history as a classroom for high-stakes decision-making.
He also touches on bridging gaps, fostering collaboration, especially in complex, maybe dysfunctional environments.
That's such a practical leadership challenge, isn't it? Getting different groups, different bureaucracies to actually work together effectively.
And he shows leadership can be in small things, too. A governor fixing a bridge problem quickly, handwritten notes.
Those examples really hit home. Leadership isn't always dramatic. It can be in everyday actions that show you're paying attention, you take initiative, you care.
He talks about work-life balance again, the generational shifts.
How younger generations might see it differently.
Yeah, and the need for flexibility from organizations.
Yeah.
But also acknowledging the real pressures young people face today.
It's a balancing act, isn't it? Flexibility within what the team needs. Recognizing those evolving expectations and pressures.
He really admires General Buford's question at Gettysburg, "Where do you want me?"
So simple, so powerful.
Just completely selfless, focused on the mission, whatever's needed.
It really embodies that dedication to the objective above any personal preference.
McChrystal stresses leaders need to be present, not just physically, but emotionally. He talks about embedding himself in the Middle East.
Being close to the problem, close to the team.
Even with all our technology for remote work.
That proximity still matters. Being geographically and emotionally connected to the challenges and the people tackling them.
He tells that story, the law of the swinging tail, about the Army Chief of Staff canceling a visit.
Yeah. And the ripple effect.
How even small, maybe unintentional actions by senior leaders can just crush morale, erode respect, often without the leader even realizing it.
It's a great cautionary tale. Those unintended consequences of leadership actions, even small ones, can be huge.
And then, wrapping up this part, he comes back to character itself. It's easy to spot in others.
But hard to define, even for yourself.
Exactly. Is it even a real thing, he wonders, or just a construct we use?
It brings us right back to the core question. What is character? It's slippery, maybe, but he argues it's absolutely essential.
Okay, part 4. Broader reflections now. Character, legacy, starts with something tricky. People you admired who? well, who go bad.
Yeah, reevaluating historical figures or even former colleagues when their later actions clash with how you saw them before.
How do you deal with that?
He suggests trying to separate the views from the person, if possible, differ on issues, try to maintain relationships. Unless core values, fundamental ethics, are violated, then it's different.
He talks about the temptation to rationalize, that siren's call, he calls it, justifying actions that go against your values. He uses Juul Labs as an example.
That highlights how powerful self-interest can be and how easily we can convince ourselves that something wrong is actually okay, especially if ambition is involved, casually abandoning values you supposedly hold.
He makes a sharp distinction between opportunity, which is good,
right? Seizing chances.
and opportunism, which he sees as the unchecked pursuit of personal gain, no matter the cost to others.
And he warns about a society that starts prioritizing that, celebrating opportunism over principle. That erodes things.
He hits on loyalty again, how crucial it is for leaders to back their people, especially when it's tough.
And the damage done when they don't. Perceived betrayal just shatters trust, kills loyalty. It's corrosive.
He explores why people, even leaders, sometimes stay silent on important issues, the pressures.
Leading to that deafening silence, he calls it.
Yeah, and that silence allows extremists, opportunists, to dominate the conversation.
It's a complex mix of pressures, isn't it? Fear, career concerns, maybe just exhaustion. But the result is that important voices aren't heard.
McChrystal offers his own take on patriotism. It's not just flag pins and symbols for him.
No, it goes deeper. It's rooted in commitment to the country's principles and to fellow citizens.
So true patriotism demands good character, responsible citizenship.
That's his view. It's an active thing, rooted in values and actions, not just outward displays.
And he connects rights and responsibilities. Rights aren't just handed to us.
No, they're created, sustained by a mutual agreement. We agree to respect and defend them for each other.
It's a practical deal, requires everyone to participate.
Exactly. Rights exist because we collectively uphold the responsibilities that make them possible.
He uses that old phrase, who'll bell the cat, basically asking, who's going to step up?
Yep, and the responsibility is squarely on us. Individual citizens, we have to act for the common good. Honor the past? Sure, but the responsibility now, it's ours.
He reflects honestly on past decisions, like Afghanistan, admits potential missteps.
In the goals, maybe?
The execution.
Yeah, but he also asks, would doing nothing have been worse? It's that complex evaluation, acknowledging errors, but also considering the alternative. He does seem particularly concerned about the chaotic withdrawal, though. The strategic damage, the impact on allies.
He tackles unreasonable bosses, that tension between driving performance and being liked.
Sometimes you have to demand high standards, right? But where's the line?
He acknowledges that necessity sometimes, but stresses explaining why, connecting the demands to the mission, and considering the ethical cost of working for someone truly unreasonable. He also says leaders set the tone, their aides, their staff. They should complement the leader, not amplify their flaws.
That's a key point about team dynamics around a leader. Staff should be a check, a balance perhaps, not just echo chambers or enablers of bad traits.
He advocates for calm strength when expressing anger or disappointment.
Especially now, maybe. It was so much frustration around.
Yeah. He suggests calm, direct expression is often way more effective than outbursts.
Measured, controlled, but clear.
And when there's no clear right answer, in those gray areas.
Ground your decision in your values. That's his advice. Your core personal values become your compass. That's always the right approach, ethically, he argues.
He talks about aging, that shift in relevance as you move from being a key player to maybe a more senior or retired role.
And the need to find new ways to contribute. Stay engaged.
Exactly. Actively seeking out how to still add value, share experience in a different way. He touches on the physical, mental aspects of aging too, acknowledging limits.
But also appreciating the present. The value of experience now.
Yeah, finding that balance, accepting the changes, but still valuing the richness of the current moment. His view on war monuments has evolved too.
How so?
Less about celebrating victory, more about acknowledging duty, sacrifice, the human cost.
A shift from triumphalism to remembrance. A deeper recognition of service and loss.
He shares some really moving stories about attending funerals at Arlington National Cemetery.
Highlighting that shared humanity, the commitment of those who served.
Yeah,
that profound sense of shared sacrifice, that dedication that binds people together.
And on mortality, death, the afterlife. He expresses a sense of peace acceptance of the unknown.
Just finding peace with the inevitable, with the questions that maybe don't have answers.
And he concludes, really, reflecting on the value of a life lived with conviction, with commitment, with trust.
Emphasizing that every choice we make, big or small, adds up. It shapes who we become.
Yeah, those elements, conviction, commitment, trust, are what endure, what define character in the end.
So let's try to summarize the core takeaways from this deep dive into McChrystal's On Character.
Okay. We saw how big moments can force self-examination, a real look at our core beliefs or convictions.
Right. And that examination isn't just navel-gazing. It's also about actively engaging with the world to shape those beliefs.
We learned actions speak louder than words. They're the truest reflection of character. And figuring out our convictions, that's a lifelong journey.
Definitely. Often helped by learning from others, from philosophy, from history.
We looked at how experiences, family, community, even unexpected things like grandchildren shape us.
And how things like work and life aren't separate boxes, but connected parts of a whole.
We grappled with tough challenges. Leadership in the digital age, ethical dilemmas, corruption, the need for critical thinking.
And the importance of things like discipline, resilience, embracing the suck, prioritization, and choosing leadership every day.
And finally, those broader reflections on legacy, loyalty, patriotism, and finding meaning through conviction and commitment, even when facing difficult truths or the process of aging.
And for you, the learner, we really hope exploring McChrystal's thoughts offers some valuable perspectives. Things you can use as you navigate your own learning, your own life, your own challenges.
Absolutely. So maybe here's one final thought for you to chew on. What are your core convictions, the ones that really guide your actions? And how are you actively right now engaging with the world to examine, maybe challenge, and ultimately strengthen those fundamental beliefs?
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.